Welcome to another episode of Connect the Dots. Today I'm joined by David. David, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Why don't you start off by giving us a little bit of an insight on you, David, and your
Sure.
business, P3 Media?
Sure. So I have been an entrepreneur for almost 2 decades now. Been running my company with my partner for 16 years. So where we are today is very different than where we were 16 years ago. But today we manage a portfolio of about $12 billion in e-com revenue for our clients. We're a Shopify Platinum partner. And all that means is that we do some of the most sophisticated and complex work in the e-commerce space. Manage some of the largest businesses in the world, everything from large scale platform migrations. Right now, we're in the process of doing a 1,500 store migration. We've done the largest retail rollouts in the history of the platform, all the way through paid media management, creative management, AI implementation. Obviously, that's a big piece of our world these days. But effectively, our job is to stay ahead of the curve, keep our clients ahead of the curve, and help them make more money than they can make themselves. So hopefully today I can, help your audience do the same, or, instill a little bit of wisdom or some tactics that will support the growth of either their own venture or their future venture.
Absolutely. What is it that inspired you, David, to getting into the e-commerce, the digital space?
So, even to back it up a little bit, I think just entrepreneurship has been something that's been in my blood since I, was a early child. Even before I knew the word, I knew this is what I wanted to do. And so I think one of the strokes of luck in my life has always been knowing what I wanted to do. I think a lot of people don't have the luxury of having clear direction from day one. And so I think there was always that point of, I know I'm going to be an entrepreneur. What's going to be the path? I think e-commerce came in about 20 years ago, and it was just kind of a light bulb moment I had. My first business is not what I'm doing today. I
Right.
ran a company for a few years, which was a universal shopping cart. And
Nice.
I was working on Wall Street at the time. I was doing retail therapy because I hated the work that I was doing. It felt soulless. I wasn't doing it for myself. Like most entrepreneurs, I thought I could do it better. And so I had this light bulb moment, and I remember the exact thought. And it was, if I don't pursue this, I'm going to regret this for the rest of my life. And so that day, I hit my buddy up and I asked him out for some drinks. And I told him we were going to run this company together, hoping he would buy in. And for almost 20 years, we've been working together. And so that was our entry point into e-commerce. And it was really more on the payment facilitation side of things. That's its own separate story of how we built that and really why it didn't work. But ultimately, we transitioned into the service side. That was really his background. We had been doing a lot of consulting work on the side. And I think what got us into the kind of the more like Shopify side of the equation, we were doing, Magento work about 15 years ago. Pretty cumbersome system at the time, but it was where the larger companies were going.
Right.
Shopify had market share. They were really kind of chipping away at the long tail of ecom, going after that model of how do we democratize entrepreneurship and help little people, little guys launch a company, potentially as a side hustle, maybe go online for the first time. And so we dipped our toes in the water with Shopify and just loved it. I think their culture of being builders, breaking things, moving quickly, being super agile for such a big company was something that we loved. And so we moved our entire practice over to the Shopify ecosystem and really have grown with them, as they've moved up market. I remember the push to mid-market 10 years ago, then the push to enterprise 6-7 years ago. And we've really followed suit. And we've gone from, working with the small apparel brand out of New York or the local tailor to managing portfolios of large holding companies, private equity backed businesses. Again, just largest companies on the planet.
Yeah, that's a great insight. And you're obviously a serial entrepreneur. What was the more challenging side of things in maybe the early days, whilst you're really building that company that people may not see?
Yeah, I would say the two most challenging parts early on, it's, I guess as an agency, you're managing two dynamics. You're managing pipeline
Yeah.
of we need to get clients and then retain them. And then you're managing talent acquisition. So early days as a service business, it's you alone or you and a partner, maybe you and a few other people or a few freelancers. And so the challenge in the early days is how do you acquire good talent, right?
Yeah.
Outside of yourself and in my case, my partner, we were the talent density. It was him on the tech side, me on the creative side, and we just figured shit
Nice.
out. And then, in the early days, it's all right, well, we're expanding a little bit. We're getting bigger clients. We need more internal support. How do we attract those people? And the real answer is part of it is you're telling a great story, right? Like people buy into your vision, people buy into your enthusiasm. If you've got that strong internal motor that people can feel, and you can inspire people and it can bring people in that frankly you may not deserve as a business to be able to hire because you don't have the track record, you don't have the revenue. It's a bit riskier.
Yeah.
Or a lot of what we did was we hired diamonds in the rough. So like people
Right.
that wanted to change industries, people that were super smart, but didn't necessarily have a background in what we did or have a ton of experience, but we knew we could train them up. And so early days for the first few years, it was just finding super smart people that we thought had a really high ceiling and then supporting them to really build them into our world and bring them into our world. And the cool thing about that is we've seen them thrive over the years. We've seen them, kind of move up and take leadership positions at some of the biggest
Nice.
companies in the world. And in a lot of cases, we were their entry point into technology. And then, as you evolve, that's not a problem we have anymore. We've luckily built up of enough of a reputation in our space to be able to attract the best talent in the world. And so that has, kind of, let's say, eased over time. And then I would say the other challenge early on, and this is going to be for any business, whether you're a product business or a service, it's how do you get your first customers,
Sure.
right? So as a service business, it's obviously different. We're looking for a few clients, a few dozen clients. Your product business, they're looking for that first 100 sales, then 10,000, then million sales. But it's ultimately top of funnel. How do you crack the nut of building enough trust to, get people to buy into the pitch that you're giving them, right? Like, how do you get them to buy into that vision that you'll be able to support their growth? And so that was hard early on. We'd go in and lose a lot of pitches. And again, I think people
Yeah.
at that stage were buying into our energy, our enthusiasm, our
Yeah.
confidence. They knew we were going to fight for them and bleed for them and do whatever we had to be successful. And ultimately, I think um, maybe they read on this. This is always obviously something we talk about. We um, are just long-term thinkers. I think a lot of businesses and agencies out there are really focused on the next deal, the next quarter, versus thinking
Yeah.
about 1 to 10 years out.
Mhm.
And I think if you're thinking long term, you're focusing on trust and you're focusing on delivery and you're focusing on, um, you know, maintaining that relationship versus churning it. And so that was something we focused on early. And a lot of our first, second, third clients became referral partners for us. We have clients that have brought us, dozens of other clients over the years. And that only comes from just delivering, doing great work, and just being so good that they can't ignore you.
You mentioned earlier about hiring talent. I guess what do you look for when you are hiring top talent, David?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think obviously that's changed quite a bit with AI, right? But I
Sure.
always think about talent in a couple ways. So you've got two buckets effectively. You've got the technical side, how quickly do they code? How much attention to detail do they have? What is their creative output? How good of an eye do they have? Again, depends on the role, right? Um, but a really good technical fit doesn't mean a good culture fit. And so
Sure.
the first thing I'm doing with any hire is looking for a few key attributes that honestly are hard to measure and I've made mistakes on in the past. But one, really high integrity, something that's really big with us and I think should be big in every organization is taking ownership. And so what that means is when things go well, you get the praise. When things go poorly, you also should be taking the blame, right? You shouldn't be blaming other people. You should be looking for opportunities to improve. And so, let's say it's a minor thing and someone else, um, you know, was the main call it contributor and why something went wrong. What I
Yeah.
find amongst top performers is they still are taking ownership for where things broke down and looking for
Massively.
opportunities to prevent that in the future. And so that's one of the absolute top things. I think that goes hand in hand with integrity. which is a huge one, right? Like we have a ton
Yeah.
of access to client data, financial information, PII. And so it's super important to have very high integrity people. You know, when you start with us, you start with almost a full trust battery. And then, you know, as you notice little things, little friction points, you know, lack of transparency, that battery drains. But
Hmm.
we're always looking for people to start with us, and that battery just builds over time, right? They're showing consistent integrity with us. And then obviously, you know, the key things, right? Attention to detail. I think in our world today, the kind of the last thing that I'm really looking for, that again, it's hard to measure because I think people can prep for this in interviews. It is just a voracious appetite to learn. You know, I think, you know, having been in this space for almost 2 decades now, I've seen enough cycles in e-commerce, and part of what makes people thrive in our space is just a dedication to continually learn, because the world changes quickly. If you're looking at just Shopify, you know, at this point, they're releasing something like 150 new platform updates every quarter, probably more than that
Wow.
at this point. And so just
Right.
keeping up with that platform is a full-time job.
That's a job in
Now add in the
itself.
Yeah, absolutely. We have people on our team dedicated to that. But
Yeah.
now add in the fact that, you know, Anthropic and OpenAI and Google and Meta, and every other kind of nascent AI platform out there is competing to innovate constantly. And so what
Mhm.
we have now is a world where one week, one platform is doing amazing creative work, and then the next week another system comes out that's, you know,
Yeah.
stomping them in terms of performance. And so I
Yeah.
think that appetite to learn, you know, is even more important now if you want to stay relevant in the space, if you want to stay ahead. And as an agency, our entire job is looking for that unfair competitive advantage by staying ahead. And so the knowledge game is huge. And so
Yeah.
again, I think that's a huge attribute. It's hugely important, particularly at this time in the world.
Absolutely. I think it seems that Claude's almost taken over ChatGPT these days. And you mentioned a great point on accountability. My background was corporate sales.
Mhm.
I broke record after record each year, but whenever there was an odd occasion where I didn't hit my monthly number, the accountability that I used to take, it was nobody's fault. It was not the businesses, it wasn't the
Yep.
teams, it wasn't the managers, it was my fault. It was
Yep.
my fault why I didn't hit that. You've helped brands generate significant online revenue. What are the biggest growth opportunities that e-commerce brands sometimes still miss?
I think the big one that people still miss, and I'll talk about what's good, the future stuff, but I think the big one that people are missing is still creative. It's still storytelling.
Mm.
Um, you know, when we take on new clients, one of the things we look for is either a strong internal creative engine or people that are willing to invest in creative. At the end of the day, you know, we're typically not selling water to people in the desert. We're selling apparel to people in the suburbs, or, you know, protein powder to people in metropolitan cities, products where there's a ton of competition. And so what can set you apart in a world where your shelf is full of 50 different protein powder options, where 100 different brands on a Google search will show you a pretty similar bikini top? It's
Yeah.
storytelling, right?
Sure.
It's your creative direction. It's that intangible that can set you apart from everyone else. And it's where kind of the magic happens, right? And so a lot of brands are still missing that spark, that investment in storytelling, that investment in really clear creative direction, that separation from other people. And they're all playing this game of like, how do we fit in the middle? How do we hire a
Hmm.
model that looks like everyone else? How do we create a background that looks like everyone else?
Yeah,
How
I
do
know
we
what you
create that
mean.
generic story?
Mhm.
And so I think true inspired creative can set you apart, and you know that requires bringing the right people on ultimately, you know, that have a clear vision, either leadership or talent internally that can steer that ship. I think that's a huge one. From there, I think the measurable piece is then how do you test that creative? How do you create an engine where you can get a lot of it? So through paid media, through social, through on-site content, through partnerships, you can expand that story and see what really works. But I think that's almost always the miss. There's very few brands that I see come to us and have that really dialed in. And part of our job is to steer them strategically and really find their voice, and then ultimately create an engine so that they can extend that voice on different platforms.
Mhm.
Um, and then, you know, I'd say the future state here is I think we're living in this like headline economy right now where clients come to us and, they read the newswire and say like, oh, well, what can we do with Cloud for SEO? How do we improve our
Yeah,
scalability with creative? Um, it's an interesting space now because truly, if you think it, you can do it with AI.
sure, sure.
It doesn't mean it's great, but it means you can speed up that time from thought to ideation to production to deployment. But I think with that comes this point where it's like you're almost, you get this lethargy because you have too many ideas. And so it's hard to make a choice, right? That decision fatigue of where do I go next? And so the obvious investment brands should be making is thinking about the things they do well or thinking about where their internal deficiencies are, looking for ways to leverage AI to support this and picking off a few and doing them extremely well and moving on to the next, right? And so if it's going back to that creative example, something we've done for a lot of our brands is obviously taking their baseline, um, seasonal shoots and then leveraging AI to extend that. And so a great example of that would be taking an on model shoot. Let's say it's shot in the spring, in Central Park. You can take that same model, swap clothing, put them in a different background. And so for one of
Yeah,
our clients, we had a Bad Bunny collaboration.
nice,
It's a couple days before the Super Bowl. They
nice.
wanted to take those jackets, put it on someone, put it in the stadium in California, and make it look like we were actually in the Super Bowl. We were able to spin that up in an afternoon, launch it on social, paid, on site, and email. And that was all coming from baseline content that was created from an actual photographer. And so I think, there's a lot of ways to take this stuff, kind of infuse the real world content with AI to extend the life of some of these assets and, just looking for 100 different opportunities to infuse that into your organization is going to help you, reach new customers, communicate better to your customers, create more tailored and personalized experiences. And so I think that is where brands should be focusing a lot of their energy.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. It's such a game changer. I'm a CEO of an AI business, so I know some of the power of AI that you've just
Yeah.
described there. I'd love to ask you, what is your opinion on, or your sort of insight, if you like, on companies who are doing six figures to then those who are doing 7 to 8 figures? What is the main differences and qualities that you see, David?
Yeah. Um, I think the 6 figure and seven figure business share a lot of the same attributes. I
Hmm.
think once you've hit seven, you've got some product market fit. You're selling a product people want to buy.
Sure.
Where you can have a successful Kickstarter and sell 6 figures, mid 6 figures, maybe even pushing the seven. And that doesn't mean product market fit. That means you've caught a moment in time potentially. And then it becomes a game of how do you create some longevity out of that.
Yeah.
Typically at that 6 figure range, you're still working out production and manufacturing and shipping and a lot of the basic
Yeah.
logistics. And so that's that period where you really want to focus on the customer experience.
Hmm.
Um, my favorite all-time customer service experience I've ever had, and I think it really applies to that range. And I think this will elucidate how I think people should be thinking about their businesses. I bought this travel steamer on Amazon 15 years ago.
Right.
And, I use it a couple times. I get a call a week later from this little old lady. And she goes, hey, I just wanted to make sure you like your steamer. My grandson started this business and they gave me a job here. And there was no ask. She was just checking in to see if I
Nice.
liked it.
Yeah, I like that.
And honestly, I would have never put another thought into that steamer out of it goes in my suitcase when I travel. Uh, but since that call, I have sent a link to that product 100 times. And it was
Really,
because that absolutely, because how do you not buy into the story of a little grandmother, running customer service for grandchildren's
I'm
businesses?
sold.
You're bought into their vision, right?
I'm sold.
And
Yeah.
so, they always say it's like treat your first 100 customers like the most important people on the planet. Like those become your evangelists, those become the people that recommend it. That
Hmm.
business understood that. And so I think taking that mentality in everything you do at that level is super important. Naturally, as you scale, you want to try to continue that ethos, but it does change when you go from a couple hundred customers to a couple thousand to a couple million. It's a very, your ability to service those people in that way is different. But let's say you're
Yeah.
moving to the couple $1 million in revenue side. How do you manufacture? How do you create that experience, that human touch, that tactility? One thing that we recommend to our clients is, let's say over the holidays, you take your 10% highest AOV or highest purchasing customers. You send them handwritten notes. You send them just a surprise and delight gift. If you're a
Yeah.
apparel brand, you send them a cap. You send them a scarf. You send them something
Yeah.
relatively inexpensive with a handwritten note. And you say,
Mhm.
hey, this is coming from David, founder of P3 Media. Just wanted to thank you for supporting our business. We're
Yeah.
family owned. This is our passion. This is our life. And so just wanted to give you a token of our gratitude. And little things like that go a long way. And you're able to create that. And there's tons of companies out there that can help you do this at scale. So you can get nice calligraphy, handwritten notes. They can help with the
Yeah.
gift with purchase. But there's ways to bring that appreciation back to the customer at that scale. And then I would say once you're talking enterprise, it's a different game and those tactics work. But I would say the difference between 6 figure, 7 figure, 9, 10 figure is really the internal cultures. When you're talking that kind of SMB, it's all passion. The CEOs are up till 3 in the morning. You're getting calls at all hours. This is their baby. This is the thing they're putting their life force into.
Yeah.
We're looking for triple digit growth every single year. They're willing to take bigger swings. They're okay with misses. And so the risk profile is different. When you get
Yeah.
into large and enterprise, the risk profile changes entirely. And
Mhm.
we want measured growth, but more than anything else, we want risk mitigation. And so the
Sure.
swing that you're taking can't jeopardize our business as a whole. And so it's a very different approach to how you think about marketing, creative, AI use, right? And so compliance becomes a bigger issue. The tools we're able to use change. Whether we're able to leverage a tool and on model versus not changes entirely in AI. So all the nuances are really pronounced when you go between those two different segment sizes.
Yeah, definitely. I like the personal touch. My financial advisor sends me a bottle of Moet champagne every
There
year,
you
and
go.
that's enough
That's
for
how you know
me.
he's getting good commission off you.
I know that one bottle of Moet champagne that'll cost £50,
Yeah,
$50.
yeah,
Where do you see, David, the business, let's say, in the next couple of years?
yeah. So I'd say two things. I remember think about 2 years ago at this point, I sat down with my partner and said, we need to reframe our business. If we're not AI native, if we are not leading the charge in this space, we're not going to be around because
Mm,
our industry is changing. The landscape is changing. I mean, my thesis on our space is there's going to be a few agencies really dominating the space, particularly in the Shopify world.
sure.
Um, Enterprises are still going to need people to implement this, to do change management, to do staff aug, to be true AI native folks in their organizations to either rebuild, repair, or optimize their existing systems. So we are investing deeply in this space. My
Nice.
goal at P3 as an organization, it's always to grow, but it's to
Sure.
grow without losing our quality of delivery.
Yeah.
In our space, I believe we are um, the best with delivery in the entire e-commerce space. We have the highest quality and the highest standards of delivery. And I want to grow as quickly as we can while maintaining that and still being able to say that with total honesty. And so whether that's 20% growth or 500% growth, that is the benchmark. It's growth with that integrity, with that quality standard. Because my goal in 2 to 3 years is to be synonymous with the best delivery in the entire e-commerce space. And so we're doing everything we
Nice.
can to work towards that. And so again, that just all that comes down to is increasing our talent density, bringing on great clients, working with clients that intellectually stimulate us because I think that's big. Not just bringing on anybody.
I
It's
like that. Yeah.
it's having clients that challenge us and allow us to push the boundaries of what's capable on or what's possible on Shopify in the e-com space, in the retail space. We love doing work that we're proud of, and that's boundary pushing. And so that's what we're looking for more of.
Nice, man. I like that. I like that a lot. We have a lot of C-suite, a lot of founders, but we also have a lot of a younger audience that are listening, do you have any advice for our younger audience who are maybe thinking about getting into the space, whether it's entrepreneurship, maybe they're starting a business? Because a lot of people I see out there are maybe too scared, to take that risk that we discussed earlier, how important taking risks are. Do you have any advice for our younger audience?
Yeah. I mean, I think as an entrepreneur, the hardest step is the first one. And I
Sure,
think
it is.
that first step is the thing that paralyzes people, or it's the thing that propels them to try. I think the truth of it, and you're going to read this in 90% of business books, but it's the truth. Like,
Yeah,
the only way to be successful in this game is to continually push through the fear, to continually push through those boundaries, to stretch yourself. Like, you will go through hard times, and that's okay. I think the beauty of being a early founder, a young entrepreneur, is a bit of naivete. You don't know how difficult it is, because if you did, you wouldn't do it.
yeah,
I love this. This is, kind of what I live for.
yeah.
But who
Same.
knows? If I knew how difficult it would have been for the last 16 years, I'm not sure I would have pursued this path. And I think most people would probably recognize that. In the early years, you're going to make more money working from someone else, and the fruits of your labor
Yeah,
pay off over a long period of time. Um, but honestly, for the right person, for the people that it's in their DNA, there's no better life to live. You
yeah,
get to, create a thought and then manifest the physical outcome of that. You get to change people's lives. I mean, for me, the most rewarding part of our job is, I don't want to say this and be too hokey, but as an entrepreneur, you're kind of a dream maker, right?
yeah.
You're manifesting your own dreams. In our case, as a service business, we're working with other founders and CEOs and entrepreneurs and helping them manifest their dreams within our organization. One of my core tenets is to help our team members manifest their dreams and actualize who they are and become better versions of themselves. And so, I'm deeply drinking the Kool-Aid of entrepreneurship. And I think, there's certainly other ways to find yourself and better yourself. But for my money, there's no way I prefer to spend my time becoming a better person. You're going to learn
Yeah.
a lot about yourself. But the short answer is, man, just jump off the cliff. Like, if you have an idea, if you think it's viable, there's never been a better time to become an entrepreneur. There's
100%.
never been a better time to do market research and deep dive in your space and look for white space in the market where other people aren't capturing it. Great example of an early entrepreneur. I had my floor redone maybe a month ago. Usual Google search, what are the best floor repair people in my area. I go to the first site, looks credible, looks legit, SEO optimized. I call the guy, he comes by that day to give me a quote. Turns out he's like a 20-year-old kid, super young guy. So I asked him, I was like, how long have you been doing this for? I do my typical diligence. And he was like, honestly, I launched my site like a month ago. I did it all in Claude. I asked it to SEO optimize and run the creative. And it's that hustle, it's that ingenuity, it's that ease that I think
Mm.
is really impressive. And so, he was a great example of just someone that wanted a thing, had the grit, had a bit of technical know-how, wasn't a developer himself, but just a little bit of like YouTubing that got him to figure out how to do this thing. And now he's
Yeah.
in business doing real contracts.
Nice.
And so again, there's just never been a time in history that's been better to be an entrepreneur.
100%, massively. You touched on obviously manifestation. Um, you clearly go to the gym. How important is health in fitness and mindset to you, David?
That's everything, man. I mean, that's where it all starts. Um, I guess to break those two things up, I started exercising consistently at like 13. I was lucky enough to get into an early habit and stick with it through my entire adult life. But it was the first thing that taught me that, um, the power of compounding effort, the power to delayed gratification. I started lifting at 13. I started seeing results at 14 or 15,
Nice.
continually improving and getting a little bit better. And then as an entrepreneur, right? Like, I travel a lot. I'm in meetings all day. I'm in high stress environments. You're getting projected a lot of other people's stress, whether that be within your company itself, whether that be your clients projecting their own stress. And so for
Yeah,
me, exercise has been a great way to kind of purge that, right? Just get the
me
energy out,
too.
take a long
Yeah.
walk, do some compound lifting, and it just I think it really ties to the mental side. Um, on the mental front, over the years, I've spent a lot of time, let's say, either building or rebuilding myself. At about 2022, I started going deeply down just the self-help and business book rabbit hole. And honestly, I've never stopped. So, big proponent of self-development, big proponent of reading the works of people that have already done it before.
Sure.
It's not a mentor, but it is a proxy for a mentor. And
Yeah.
so, if you're reading an economic book by Ray Dalio, you're getting the distilled wisdom of one of the world's greatest investors over the lifetime of their work. And they've put the energy in to write a 1,000-page book to teach you what they've learned. Apply that to anything. And so I think books are the best way to get that outside of potentially just having a real world mentor.
Massively.
Um, and on the mental front, right? I dabble in meditation, particularly in Q4. As we get into the busy season and Black Friday, it's a great time to,
Back to work.
yeah, exactly. Try to cleanse the mind a bit. I think podcasts are wonderful for this. Again, great way to get distilled knowledge down. You're getting access to the best and brightest worldwide, and so again, it's a really good way to pull in a bit of wisdom. And I'm just an inspiration seeker, and so I love finding either true inspiration, either people or moments that drive me forward. I get that through work, I get that through my family, and then sometimes you just have to be delusional. You're not feeling inspired, you're feeling demotivated, you're a little bit burnt out. Sometimes it's
Yeah.
okay to just charge yourself up with false delusion and wake up in the morning, on a
Yeah.
gray day when you're feeling demotivated,
Mm.
and do that thing that gets you going anyway. That's part of the game. It's like exercise. I might lift 4 days a week or 5 days a week, and usually about two of them I don't want to go. And so, how do you
Yeah,
find
but
the
you got
motivation to still go? Yeah, yeah.
yeah. Discipline, right? Over motivation.
That's exactly right, man. Exactly right.
Absolutely. David, thank you so much, buddy.